Hi everybody, so it's day 13, the penultimate day. Now I hope you're ready for this because this is going to turn into quite a lengthy seminar. Hopefully you saw the video about the best thing to do for day 15. What I wanted to talk about today was what to do after that and kind of going forward. And I will start by reiterating one of the principles that we stand by when it comes to nutrition and health. And that's about choice and personal responsibility. We're all adults and we can eat or drink whatever we want, whenever we want. I'm not one of those people who preaches you should do this or you should do that, or thinks that any kind of all or nothing program is the way forward. That said, health and nutrition can be quite confusing at times. So, like we've experienced in the last 2 weeks, it can be really useful to have a bit of a plan, some guidelines, kind of guardrails even. So when thinking about what to do next with your nutrition after this 14 or 15 days, I want you to think about it seriously and kind of make the most of it. And so I thought I'd put together this video for a few things to bear in mind. So I'm going to explain a little bit of the science behind it, if you like, and hopefully that will give you that bit of extra context to help you make that decision. So what we've been doing impacts our insulin sensitivity. Now, hopefully you probably all know what that is anyway, but by means of a quick recap so that we're on the same page, it's like a continuum of how well our body responds to insulin, which is a hormone that's released that helps us manage our blood sugar. So at one end of this continuum, we've got insulin resistance, i.e. type 2 diabetes and other metabolic diseases and bad stuff. And the other end, we've got insulin sensitivity, somebody who is healthy and insulin sensitive and their body kind of behaves normally. And unfortunately, over time, but not just time really, more diets and lifestyles, most people shift towards that path of insulin resistance and then pre-diabetes and diabetes. So one of the things we're trying to do to improve our overall health, manage our body composition and weight, is we want to be moving towards insulin sensitivity, wherever it is that we're starting on that continuum. So that essentially means managing blood sugar. And for most people, that means reducing sugar and starchy carbohydrates, just like we've done over this last 2 weeks. So there's another phrase that people often use to describe this mechanism, this theory that goes on in the body, and that can be quite useful. And they say carbohydrate tolerance, i.e. how much carbohydrate can your body tolerate before it starts to have a negative impact on your health and usually on our weight and body composition. So if we think about it as that continuum again, it's like it's the reverse. So someone who's insulin resistant does not tolerate carbohydrate well at all and will do well to eat a very small amount. Conversely, someone who's insulin sensitive can actually tolerate quite a bit more. And there are quite a few things that influence our carbohydrate tolerance. That's quite a mouthful actually, isn't it? Genetics is one, but it's certainly not the whole picture. I mean, the obvious things like our level of physical activity, the amount of muscle mass that we have, the type of exercise we do, and then things like stress impact it as well. And actually, one of my teachers, or mentors, I suppose, from years ago, used to say that until your body fat is below about 10 to 12% for a man, and maybe 15 for a woman, you're insulin resistant when it comes to optimizing health, and therefore you need to eat accordingly. That's quite low. If you've had your body fat measured recently, you'll realize that is quite low. Right, deep breath. I hope you're still with me. Picking up on that concept of carbohydrate tolerance, what we found with clients over the last 20 years or so is that many people do seem to have this threshold for an approximate amount of total carbohydrates. So total carbohydrates means adding up all the sugars, natural and added, plus all of the starchy and complex carbohydrates that we eat and drink over a day or over a week, however you want to look at it. And that to optimize their health, they basically need to stay below that. And if they stay below that threshold, they get healthier. And it tends to go hand in hand with losing body fat or losing weight. But go above that, and the process almost grinds to a halt. It almost can shut off a bit like a switch. So if you go on the internet which I don't generally recommend, you'll hear people say things like, oh, that doesn't actually matter as long as you're in a calorie deficit. And the thing is then they're usually referring purely to weight loss. In theory, that might be correct if you're referring purely to weight loss. I'm not so sure. But on the internet, it's like these two warring factions. Oh, it's just about calories and calorie deficit versus it's this kind of blood sugar insulin hypothesis. And what I would say to that is that it's fine to have a little row on the internet, but what we see with real people in practice is that this carbohydrate threshold thing does seem to be most important. And I'd say that A, because it gives the best results, B, because health is about a lot more than just your weight, and C, and this is probably something to discuss another day, that actually by managing your carbohydrates and things and managing processed food and all the things that we've been doing the last 2 weeks, you probably tip that energy balance anyway. But yeah, that's a whole nother story, and it's a bit more complex than people make out. So another deep breath, both for me and for you. With that all in mind, here are some suggestions, things to consider for what you want to do next when it comes to nutrition. And of course, you can do whatever you want and ignore everything I say. I don't mind at all. So if you are concerned about your metabolic health, you'd like to improve your insulin sensitivity, manage blood sugar better, it would be a good idea to keep your carbohydrate intake low. How low exactly? Well, that's a more individual thing. And contact us if you want to talk about that separately. Number 2, one way of doing that is to continue eating pretty much as we have been, indefinitely. Then every 5 to 7 days, do what we're doing on Monday and intentionally eating a much higher carb meal. That's pretty much what we're going to do and kind of what we do most of the time. Every now and then it goes a bit out of whack, yeah, but generally that's kind of what we try to do. It works quite well from a kind of social perspective. You can kind of make it work with social occasions and stuff, and also psychologically as well. Next point. So the other thing that we've done over the last couple of weeks, which I haven't really talked about that much up until now, is remove many of the common allergens from our diet. The things like dairy, wheat, gluten, artificial stuff, etc. And I know that quite a few of you have noticed some positive changes in digestion, in improvements in your skin, in reduction in kind of stomach issues, digestive upsets, and generally experiencing less kind of allergic type symptoms, whatever they are for you. Now, this is all really useful information because if we're experiencing those symptoms externally, that inflammatory response, which is what they all are, that is going on in every single cell of our body. So I would really consider and pay attention to those things once you decide if and when you're going to reintroduce any of those foods that you think might be an issue. I'm not saying do or don't, I'm just saying pay attention. Because linked to that, with some food sensitivities, there's not necessarily a linear relationship between how much you eat and the symptoms you experience. It's not dose dependent. So sometimes, just when you have a little bit of something, whatever it is, it sets off this systemic inflammatory response. So even when you think, oh, it's just a little bit, that'll be okay, it may be, it may be not. And again, that varies person to person. So it's up to all of us to make our own informed decisions and compromises. So, final tip now, and a bit of a generalization, but if I were to make recommendations that would work for 80% plus of people, certainly white Caucasians, here's what I'd say. Firstly, stick to pretty much how we've been eating. I've yet to meet anyone who doesn't do better without dairy and gluten. Number 2, if you're going to eat starchy carbs, then the best time to have them is in the evening, and eat your veg and protein first. Number 3, have your meal where you do eat differently and you do have more carbohydrates about once a week. And even when you do, over that day, prioritize your protein intake. And remember, kind of all along, you're not eating no carbs. You're getting your carbohydrates predominantly from vegetables, nuts, seeds. And with those vegetables, make them 75% green stuff and from above the ground. Right, wow, podcast over. Let me know if you've got any specific questions.